My name's Brandon and this is Cartoon Network Video Game History, a show where I take a look back on all of the video games based on Cartoon Network shows and retrospectively review them. It's been a while, so some of y'all might have thought I was done with the Ben 10 reviews. Well, think again. The original run of Ben 10 shows stretched from 2005 to 2014, consisting of 4 different series, a bunch of made-for-TV films, and 7 different video games. Ben 10 was Cartoon Network's golden goose throughout this era. You could probably make arguments that it's the most successful franchise the network has ever seen. Because it's hard to quit a good thing, it took just 2 years for the show to be rebooted. In 2016, audiences were introduced to a new series, simply titled Ben 10. It featured a simpler art style and focused much more on comedy. Now, where have I seen that before? Yeah, this kind of reboot is super popular these days, all because Teen Titans Go was a mega hit. While Powerpuff Girls and Thundercats Roar seem to have been far less successful than Teen Titans Go, Ben 10 is chugging along nicely. I mean, what are the odds anything Ben 10 related would be unsuccessful at this point? Naturally, with the show being rebooted, a video game was bound to follow. So in late 2017, we got Ben 10, released for the PlayStation 4, Xbox One, Nintendo Switch, and PC. While we have seen some developers make multiple Ben 10 games, we've got a brand new developer in charge here. Taurus Games took over development for this reboot. They're an Australian developer, so I actually have a fair bit of fondness for them. They've been kicking around since 1994, which is a damn miracle considering how dire the Australian games industry has been at times, and they've worked on licenses like Jurassic Park, Beavis and Butthead, Spider-Man, and even Star Wars. Not bad for a bunch of scrappy Aussies. It also says on their website that they developed Cartoon Network Battle Crashers. I was initially very confused by this, but after some quick googling, I found that they were responsible for porting the game over to Nintendo Switch. I guess I kinda overlooked that in my Battle Crashers review because almost every Switch review for it just credits Magic Pockets. Heck, the Metacritic page credits an entirely different developer that I'm pretty sure had nothing to do with the game. This is also the final Ben 10 game to be released as of this video. A new Ben 10 game titled Ben 10 Power Trip has been announced for this year, but very little is known about it, and considering the world's current situation, who knows if it releases on time. From a critical perspective, Ben 10 fared similarly to most other Ben 10 games. The PS4 and Xbox One version's average scores hover around 5 to 6, but the Nintendo Switch version, on the other hand, is a little different. The Metacritic average for the game is just a 4.1 out of 10. Seeing this, I assumed that the Switch port must have run really poorly or something, but a quick glance at reviews seems like it's not really any different to the other versions, so I'm not really sure why it scored significantly lower. There weren't a whole lot of big sites that reviewed the game, which has been a trend for newer Cartoon Network games. In the past, sites tried to review everything, but that just isn't feasible in this day and age. Of the most positive reviews, Nintendo Life gave the game a 6, while some hunk over at Push Square also gave the game a 6. Yes, as I alluded to in the last episode, I have already played and in fact reviewed Ben 10 on PS4. I look back on my first time with this game quite fondly, however, I'm pretty eager to see if the game holds up several years later. I now have the context of every other Ben 10 game, which I didn't have at the time of my first review, so it'll be quite interesting to compare it to some of my favourites in the series, like Cosmic Destruction. But before I get into the review, you see that subscribe button underneath the video? Just go ahead and click on it if you haven't already. I'm creeping closer and closer to Nickelodeon video game history, which means dozens of Nicktoons game reviews. I know you don't want to miss out on that. Now, on with the review. Ben 10 follows a similar formula to the rebooted show. This game is essentially a reboot of the style of Ben 10 video games we know and love, and also sometimes hate. Being based on the reboot, it's obviously going to borrow quite a bit of the style of the new show. Personally, I think the art style has translated okay-ish to 3D. It's not stunning or anything, but I don't think it's absolutely hideous in the way some other games that have adapted 2D shows have been. As a whole though, Ben 10 is not even remotely graphically impressive. Nothing about this convinced me that this was a PS4 game, you know? It really feels like this game could exist on the PS3 without issue. Heck, it could probably exist on the PS2 as well. The cutscenes are also very low budget. One of the best examples is in the parade cutscene early on, where they just say screw it and make most of the crowd be cardboard cutouts. They actually use this shortcut a few times, so I'll assume Taurus were working with a shoestring budget and a tight deadline. They probably couldn't justify putting too much into cutscenes that honestly aren't that important. While all the other Ben 10 beat-em-ups generally featured pretty elaborate stories, except for maybe Omniverse 2, story plays a minor role here. Again, I'm doing a bit of assuming here, but the Ben 10 reboot seems more focused on comedy rather than telling an intricate narrative, so it would make sense that the game would be the same. Interestingly, the game's levels are basically designed as episodes. There are 6 levels total, with 2 levels being dedicated to a specific villain. None of these stories interconnect, so it's basically like you're playing through 3 standalone episodes of the show. I think it's a pretty unique take, and again, Taurus seems to be playing within the restraints of the new show. As for the gameplay, it's going to be extremely familiar to you if you've played basically any Ben 10 game before, except Galactic Racing. I'm still floored that game even exists. Ben 10 sees you take control of Ben Tennyson, switching between an arsenal of aliens, each of which play differently, have a unique special move they can use, and you'll power them up as you progress. Series staples like aliens using their various powers to remove roadblocks and traverse the environment return, and when you defeat enough enemies, your Omnitrix fills and you're able to unleash a powerful super attack. It's fun to see each alien's super attack, and it helps make combat not drag on forever, but it does suffer from the low budget like the graphics do. Every time you activate one of these moves, you and your enemies are transported to a green void where the move takes place. I understand why this was done, but I would have loved to have these moves executed within the current level you're fighting through. Eventually the super moves become pretty run-of-the-mill and generic, because you're seeing the exact same canned cutscene over and over again. As is the case with most Ben 10 games, you don't start off with all of his aliens. Instead, you receive a drip feed of aliens the more you play. Starting out, you only have access to 3 aliens, but by the end you'll have a full slate of 10 aliens to choose from. This is actually rather impressive, because Ben 10 is a very short game and probably could have got away with not including 10. Heck, I've reviewed previous Ben 10 games that were far longer, but included a fraction of the aliens. Hats off to Taurus. Honestly, the gameplay is basically identical to what we've seen in the past. What really sets apart all of these Ben 10 beat-em-ups is the small quirks and little tweaks that each developer brings. This game doesn't control exactly the same as previous titles. It's familiar, but quite clearly developed by someone else. I'm not sure I'd say Ben 10 has the best combat, but I think it comes quite close. It's the small things that put it above others. The best of these ideas is the new objective system. Previously, like basically every beat-em-up in the history of the world, most enemy encounters were exactly the same, and the only variation is the type and amount of enemies thrown at you. Ben 10 doesn't revolutionize that, but it makes it a little less samey by giving you objectives to complete during some of these fights. For example, you might get locked into a combat arena where you have the optional objective of defeating 5 enemies with a specific alien, or for countering a specific amount of attacks. It's not reinventing the wheel, but by doing this, Taurus breaks up the monotony that can come with this style of game. Instead of just mashing attack, you actually get an opportunity to think a little bit. I also found that it was the perfect way to tempt me into using a wide variety of aliens. Every person who plays the game is going to have favourite aliens. I leaned heavily towards Grey Matter, Wildvine, Accelerate, Diamond Head, and Overflow, which I'm just now realising is half the game's roster. Not only is that a testament to how fun the aliens are to play as, but I also think it directly stems from these objectives. You get Grey Matter the earliest of all the aliens I mentioned, and if this was a previous Ben 10 game, I probably would have stuck with him for the entire playthrough. However, by enticing me to use other aliens through these challenges, I found a bunch more that really clicked with me. It's such a simple design choice, but it's brilliant. You're also given extra experience points for completing them, so you have even more incentive to try out all the aliens. As you'd probably expect, you upgrade your aliens via experience points. Here, each alien has 3 different upgrades, so there's a total of 30 for you to unlock. I unlocked the majority of these in my playthrough, but I think it's basically impossible to fully upgrade everyone on the first go, so I guess that's a tiny little enticement for repeat playthroughs. And I guess there's also the lure of re-exploring levels with newly unlocked aliens, as there are secret areas that are inaccessible on your first go. These always lead to Sumo Slammer cards, which are the game's collectible item. However, I honestly couldn't see myself replaying this, not even in an attempt to get all the trophies, as this game doesn't even have a platinum trophy to really make it worth it. While I have dumped a heap of praise on it, I think the combat in Ben 10 is missing a little bit of the depth seen in something like Cosmic Destruction. This game is clearly focused on younger kids in the same way the show is, so it makes sense that nothing is too complex here. However, it does make for a very safe and sanitized playthrough. I didn't die once while playing this game for review, and I'm pretty sure I didn't die when doing my first review either. This wouldn't be too bad if they provided some difficulty options, but they don't. A hard difficulty wouldn't go astray here, and would certainly have me considering an extra run of the game to collect the rest of the trophies. Instead, the game having barely any challenge has me pretty content at leaving my playtime where it is. While Ben 10 isn't a technical masterpiece or anything, it does run extremely well almost all of the time. The exception to this are the final 2 levels. The first of these isn't too bad, but I experienced a very weird glitch. This level features massive gusts of wind, which are both seen as hazards and something you can utilize. I'm not sure what I did or if it's just completely broken, but double jumping with any alien would send me into this weird sort of glide. It quickly had Heat Blast looking like Sherry Bobbins.
Do you think we'll ever see her again?
I'm sure we will, honey. I'm sure we will.
I decided to mess around with this and discovered I could basically skip over most of the enemy encounters, and just look at how weird it was when I accidentally found myself at the end of the level. The final level of the game is far less janky, but does suffer from serious frame rate issues. I can honestly say I didn't have a single frame rate issue outside of this level, but something about this level was a big issue. I feel like it might have had something to do with the scope of the level. I'm not 100% sure, but it feels like it's by far the largest continuous level in the game. The last thing I need to touch on is the game's length. As I mentioned earlier, there are just 6 levels in the game, which are broken up into thirds to focus on 3 specific villains. I've played Ben 10 games where levels can be around half an hour long, so the amount of levels doesn't necessarily mean too much. Unfortunately, none of these levels will take you anywhere near 30 minutes to complete. Levels are really short, and Taurus Games knows it. There's individual trophies for beating every level in under 15 minutes, which I managed to nab for every level bar one. As a result, you end up with a game that is no joke 90 minutes long. Cartoon Network games have never been lengthy. I'm pretty sure the longest game in their history is barely pushing 10 hours, but it's been a while since Cartoon Network had released a console game that was this short on content. I think the length is also a pretty big deal. The game isn't exactly cheap, it'll cost you $25 on the Australian PlayStation Store, and I definitely cannot justify that price based on how short it is. I guess the best way to pick it up at full price, quote unquote full price, would be in the bundle it has with Adventure Time Pirates of the Enchiridion. That bundle is around $60 and you get Pirates of the Enchiridion as well, which is a much meatier game. Unless you're absolutely desperate for Ben 10, wait until a significant sale hits. I really do like Ben 10. It has flaws, some of them pretty major, but I think the fundamental game on display here is good. Unfortunately, it's really hurt by the difficulty, length, and its price tag. I think the difficulty is the least of its worries. Yeah, a hard mode would have been nice, but every now and then it's fun to sit back with a game that doesn't challenge you too much. I find it similar to movies or TV shows. You're not always going to watch something gritty like Breaking Bad or Uncut Gems. Sometimes you just want to sit back and enjoy The Office or a Fast and Furious film. That kind of turn your brain off, mindless fun type of media certainly has its place. However, the length combined with the price tag makes Ben 10 a tough game to properly recommend. I think you should play it, as I really do believe it's a good game and better than Metacritic scores would have you believe, but it's not worth its full price. If you can find it on sale, I say pull the trigger and experience it for yourself. I would almost go as far as calling this my favourite Ben 10 game, if only it was just fleshed out a little bit more. And that does it for Ben 10 games, at least for the time being. You see, there was a very under the radar announcement of a new Ben 10 game coming this year. It's titled Power Trip and looks quite different from a visual perspective. As for gameplay, well, who knows? We've only got 17 seconds of footage so far and it barely shows anything. However, it's probably a safe bet to say it'll be yet another beat 'em up. And again, it's from yet another developer. Seeing that Taurus doesn't get another crack kinda sucks, and it's something that has really irked me with the Ben 10 games. It seems like every time a developer starts to get a handle on the series and are looking like they could create a truly great game, the series switches developers. Personally, I think giving one developer the chance to iterate and perfect the Ben 10 formula could have produced some amazing results. Instead, it feels like pretty much every developer given the franchise almost gets it right, but they're never given a chance to learn from their mistakes. This results in a cycle where developers are constantly making the exact same mistakes and falling into the same pitfalls over and over again. How many times did we go from having Ben's Omnitrix meter drain and force him back to human form to not having this feature from release to release? There's a million external reasons why having a single developer hasn't happened, but in my ideal fantasy world, I would have loved to see it. Next time I'll be reviewing Steven Universe Save the Light. This is the console and PC sequel to the surprise mobile hit Attack the Light. I was a huge fan of the first game, so getting a proper sequel that is also on PC and consoles is genuinely exciting. Make sure you subscribe to see me dive back into that world.